What is up, Eternal Team? Welcome to another EPL Eternal Logos podcast. We're back live in the studio with a special guest, just like I promised. We have Jenna Mercer. I've actually wondered a number of times if I'm pronouncing your last name correctly. It's Mercer?
Mercer, yeah.
Okay, cool.
You got it.
Yeah, just like I promised, she's in studio. I didn't lie to you guys. I try to do my best to tell the truth at all times. Obviously, that's what the podcast is about. But we're live in the studio. A couple of weeks or so ago, I did a intro to relationships. And normally what I will do is I'll have guests on and we will let the guests sort of decide what they want to talk about, maybe live on the show. But we kind of already had a conversation about relationships. And this is a topic that she wanted to talk about. So she did choose it, but we just didn't do it live. So here we are talking about relationships with Jenna. So hopefully you guys, this is the first person in studio we're having in the studio. So it's really cool and really exciting for me. Jenna said she's excited. I can
honored.
tell.
Honored to be here.
Yeah, we talked about this maybe like a month or so ago. And so we're finally here. I won't waste too much time talking about intro stuff. You guys got that a couple of weeks, but anything that may come up, I may mention at the end of the podcast. But let's get live with the content. So relationships, Jen, I'll give you a moment to introduce yourself. If you want to plug your social media,
Sure.
Where people can find you on TikTok, IG.
So my name is Jenna Mercer. On all social media platforms, it's Jenna from the A, because Atlanta. Jenna from the A, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter. And I'm excited to be here. Full disclaimer, anything I say, I could change my mind tomorrow. We're just really going
be held
with
against you.
yeah,
court
we're
of public
literally just
opinion.
going with the conversation, seeing what comes out, because there's a whole lot of who knows what.
Yeah.
So
That's, I think that's what's really cool about the podcasting world is that you get real firsthand expression from people. Right. It's not fake. It's not something that's overly produced or, I mess up on here all the time. We were just laughing about how I messed up in the last podcast, talking about my perspective as if I was a woman. But, it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to, acknowledge where you need to make change. What's the point of having the truth if you can't do that effectively, right? So I think it's important to remember, that as we move forward. And so having you here, thank you so much for coming. It really is. It's my honor to have you in studio and be having these conversations. So we'll do this. We'll have a part 2, a part 3. Maybe Jenna will become a primary podcaster.
who knows?
She'll come join me often. But so, Jenna from the A, right? That's the same spelling in every single. Okay, perfect.
Yep.
Just wanted to make sure. And you also gave away my location. You said in Atlanta. I don't think I've ever told people I'm from Atlanta.
Surprise.
I'm not quite in Atlanta. No, that's okay. All right, so relationships. We thought we were contemplating whether we wanted to go with a hot topic or a hot question with this hot topic. And so we decided that we'd start with a question about vetting in 2023.
Yes.
What are your thoughts? Are we, the question, I guess, is, do you feel like, from your perspective, in your dating experience, in your history, culturally and otherwise, do you feel like in 2023, we're good at vetting? You can think about that historically. Have people, generally speaking, generations been better at vetting than we are? Do you think we're better than they used to be? Or do you think we're absolute trash?
Ooh. So I would have to say, when it comes to vetting, my personal experience is that for me that's where my own past traumas come in, because you kind of, if you're not completely healed when you're going into a relationship, you're going to bring it into it somehow. And I think for me and for other women, I've seen the self-sabotage comes in with the person that you pick, not necessarily with the way that you move throughout the relationship. So, if we're talking the vetting process in 2023.
Well, let me say this, right? Because on this podcast, what I try to do is I try to make sure we establish common ground. And by common ground, I mean making sure we understand how we're using terms. So definition-wise, from this question, right? Like, what do we mean exactly when we say vetting, right? And then I'm thinking I might have told you this before, but once we've gained a good definition that we can both agree on, what's your position? What are the conclusions you draw from that? So, for instance, if you're like, hey, I think we're good at vetting, my conclusion is, or at least in my day to day life, how do I express that in my being? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, am I actually going out and practicing these vetting techniques that we talked about in the podcast? Am I not? Right? Because then you can go back and you can say, well, am I actually accomplishing what I claim to value in the definition, in what I'm saying that in the way that I say that I am, right?
Yes.
And so that, in my opinion, is the best way sort of to approach a lot of these things, because it's like, if I find that there's an error, an issue in my definition, what I believe in from a worldview perspective, if I'm not getting the outcomes, or if my conclusions are opposed to that, then I should make an adjustment theoretically, right? I think people very times can know that they're messing up, but still don't want to change. And so I think that's at least the way into knowing, okay, I do need to make a change. So vetting, what do you mean by vetting? And I can give you my definition right now.
So when it comes to vetting, I think a lot of women are very good at having their non-negotiables, or they've, learned a lot of buzz terms and techniques on how to approach, a new situation, or if you're looking into dating someone. And then where I think, at least from what I've seen, where men kind of have more of a strength in that is the following through with the vetting. Because like men might not, have their non-negotiables written down or whatever, but when they see something they don't want, I feel like they might be a little quicker to cut it off. Whereas women, it's like, oh, I could work with that because like I could see it possibly working out still, so I'm going to stay here a little longer, kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, we can get into that a little bit, because I think that's a really interesting thing. I think when I think vetting, I think, what are the things that I look for in someone I want to date, and does the person I'm looking at, whether I just have met them or that I've been friends with them for a while, do they possess those qualities?
Right.
And then will it work? Right? Because I think very oftentimes, like, relationships and dating is a lot about how you feel. And so I say, like, oh, if I feel this way about a person, my heart's in the right place. But is your mind also in the right place? Is it practical? Will it work? Once we get together, right? If I'm going left and they're going right, I might like them a lot, but that will wind up probably not working out, right? And so the relationship is headed to a doom. You know what I'm saying? So that's kind of how I think about vetting, how I define it. What are you looking for? Does this person exemplify what you're looking for? And is it going to work ultimately? Right? And am I good at, if those three things are in alignment, am I good at being like, okay, maybe I should take a step back? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
That kind of what you...
Yeah.
Is that fair?
I definitely, yes.
Along with what you were saying?
I think that's a good definition of vetting for sure. And what I've noticed with women is we're very feelings based. So part of that vetting can get a little distorted when we're holding on to the potential of the person that we see. I think seeing the person for who they truly are and taking the time to get to know that person is really essential, versus seeing how they could fit in your box of what you want for your future and then putting them in that box, just actually really getting to know the person. I also think, this generation with the best intention, we talk about dating intentionally or dating with intention. But I think that can add a lot of pressure to when you meet someone, you're viewing them straight off based on the perspective of, okay, can we date? Is this going to work?
Right.
Versus just getting to know them for the person they are. So I think even the people who are trying really hard to date intentionally and date well, sometimes that can get in the way too.
Yeah. Yeah. So your answer. So if I asked you, so with those definitions, with that talk through, right? Are we good in 2023? Universally, right? Like, on a scale, let's say on a scale, I always do this. Let's scale of 1 to 10, 10 being we're incredible, we're the best ever. 1 being we're absolute trash at dating in 2023. Vetting.
I was gonna say vetting and dating are 2 different things. You know what? I'm still in an optimistic state, so I'll give us a solid 7.
7?
7. But when you compare, back in the day when they would have arranged marriages and
Right.
stuff like that, there is something to be said with
Exactly.
the older and wiser people finding somebody compatible for you.
Right.
But at the same time, autonomy and making your own choices is nice, preferred.
Yep.
So
I was gonna say a 3. So we're in opposite. So this is great. I think we're terrible.
A 3?
Here's why. Because I think you're right. I think back in the day, let's say 1,000, 1,500 years ago, when arranged marriages were the talk of the culture, when you're talking about dating and finding someone, right? I think on the one end that it can be very extreme. Obviously, there's a lot packed into that. What family do you come from? What's your community like? If you had a great family and a great community, that probably could have ended up very well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or who are your neighbors as well too, right? Because you obviously 1,000 years ago you would marry and date your neighbors, right? Within a very, very short distance, right? Nowadays, like I said in the other podcast, like nowadays dating is basically global with
Right.
social media, right? To some degree, because our minds are consistently being fed information from literally China, like across the world, right? So I say that is one extreme. Today, I think the pendulum has swung in the completely opposite direction in a sense, right? Because I think there is so much autonomy, which is great, but also people don't have the information that they need to make the most informed decisions. Back in the day, if you had family and community, they at least were you have a community mind, right? Community mindedness, right? I can also look at the person you're dating, your dad can, your brother can, your cousin, your friend, their mom, because we're all a community, and they were looking at them like, yeah, that's probably not a good idea.
Right.
And nowadays you can kind of be like, but anyway, I'm going to do it anyway, right?
Right.
And before there was a lot of pressure to be like, okay, I'm not going to, maybe you're willing to ignore the red flags, but dad's not.
Right.
And so I have to take that into major consideration. Nowadays we just like elope. You know what I'm saying? We just run away like, oh, you said no? All right, whatever. It doesn't matter. I mean.
Yeah. And I think in the same way, the pendulum has shifted to where there are so many options or so many modes of how you can navigate dating. There are just apps that you can flip through, and it becomes really overstimulating, right? You know? So we went from small dating pool, being told exactly who to be with way back in the day, to now endless possibilities, endless platforms telling you how to do it, what is okay, what's not okay, and then like having to decide that for yourself and trust anyone who comes in your, who you start seeing.
Yeah.
And
there's a lot of like things in the dating world too, a lot of sayings and things that like are almost so extreme. Like I have my natural position is to be very centered and balanced. And so when I hear extreme takes or extreme phrases, I'll kind of cringe sometimes. One of those phrases might be, for instance, like, go out and explore and have fun.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like in essence, I can kind of understand what people are saying when they say that, but I'm like, pragmatically, what's that going to be like? How's it going to work?
Right.
What's the cost? Which is something
what's
a
the
podcast.
Level of caution.
Yeah,
while you do
exactly.
That?
Like I'm going to have an episode, I think, where I'm going to talk about investing, and it's not necessarily financial investing. I think relationships fall into that category. I think there are a lot of things in our human experience to fall into the investment category, right? Like you can invest in yourself. I think today in the dating world, it's like, oh, invest in yourself, invest in your career and all of those things. But I want to talk about investing because I know how important it is not just to consider the reward, but when you're making an investment decision, regardless if it's financial or in your personal life, it's more important that you understand the costs. And a lot of people don't take the time to explore what the costs are. It's far more, you get far more out of making an informed decision if you understand the costs and the risk associated with the decision that you're going to make. So with that being said, right, like if someone's giving someone advice, like go out and explore, that's fine. It's like, okay, well, what are you giving up?
Right.
And I think that list can be very long because then there's trauma, there's issues, there's relationships that you might get in because again, we're bad at vetting. If I'm right, then you don't have the right information to make informed decisions when you're dating people. So you're going to be dating a ton of people that are ultimately going to cause you pain and harm and damage and all of those kinds of things, traumas.
Right.
And then when you finally meet somebody who's probably worth it, You know what I'm
want to be
saying?
ready
Like,
for them. You don't want to be so
exactly.
lost that,
Right.
yeah. Um, definitely, I definitely have some caution when it comes to, the quotes or the advice that adults give us, because I would say probably once a week I hear from one adult or another, go out and have fun, just use your youth. I wish I did this. I wish I did that. And it's like, you got to take all that with a grain of salt. Like
Right.
I always say, for every amazing quote, there's another amazing quote that contradicts it,
That's
And
quotable.
you can quote me on that for real.
Yep.
Because like,
Right here on the EPL Eternal
yes.
Logos podcast, you heard it first, Jenna. That's good.
um, it's it's um it's a lot to navigate.
It is. And so that's kind of my point. I think so I think there is a balance. I think family and community are important in dating,
Mhm.
right? I think if you're one of those people that completely disregards that, I think you're on an island by yourself.
Mhm.
And we can get into this specifically, but men and women, right? Like women have a lot more to navigate when it comes to dating initially, right? Because you guys be concerned about your safety, right? Like I told my friend this the other day. I was like, as a man, I've never been afraid to go outside, right? Like, but that's a very real thing for women.
Mhm.
And so as a result of that, that's going to affect how I date, how I explore the world, how I go out and I meet people, you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
And then thus will affect my outcomes. And so I think there is a balance. So I think if you're one of those people that does fall on that end where you don't necessarily take family advice, maybe you're one of those people that doesn't have family. And I'm not talking about those extremes. I mean, if you have people in your life, I always give dating advice to my friends who are girls. I always tell them, like, if you have a guy in your life, or like lean on them to help. And I think the reason why I give it a 3 is because I think that people don't do that as much as they should. I think in our cultures, individualism is preached very, very strongly, right? And I think that has kind of taken over the culture. And I think that has to come back a little bit.
Yeah.
Because you can't do it alone. Like, it's hard to navigate by yourself.
It is. And it can be hard to find people of the opposite sex who do want a platonic friendship. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And I have met more than one guy friend or guy in my life who said, no guy wants to just be your friend, which I think can be really damaging to hear. And also I can understand, the point they were trying to make. That's how these big all or nothing quotes go.
Yep. Yep.
But you told me that a couple weeks ago, and I definitely still take it to heart. Like,
Ponder that, yeah.
Because there are some things that, I'm not going to understand the mindset of a man in the same way that my male friends will.
Right.
Are we okay to say male and female on here?
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
You know how sometimes you're like, oh, well, female's this, and it's a little derogatory or whatever. But
everybody, that's a whole other like episode and talk, honestly, because like there are certain things like on the platforms that I'm using to broadcast, there's certain words you want to stay away from, but I think we're in a safe space to where those things won't come up. And I'm going to probably have like eventually a wall of quotes like, don't say these words, so people can like read it and as we're broadcasting. But no, that's a good. We're going to get into a segment where we're talking about Jenna's rage is how we labeled it. So like you said, whatever she says can't be used against her in a court of law,
yep.
in a court of public opinion. No,
this is all just things that I allegedly said, Even if it's on tape, I just allegedly.
So I think, okay, let me ask this question.
All right.
In your experience, where's your rage mostly? Like what are some things that you hate about dating that you wish you were better at doing, or frustrations you have with the people you're dating that you don't understand, or that you're just like,
So my personal thing I wish I was better at is seeing a red flag and walking away. I think that's something that takes time to master. It's like trusting yourself and your own boundaries and knowing like, okay, this is not going to happen for me. We're not going to keep working on this. I'm kind of like, I would consider myself loyal to a fault kind of thing, and I got to be loyal to myself in advance. So that's something I want to work on. something that really gets to me in this dating world is just the idea that you could really protect someone with with the loyalty that you have and have a bond that you think is really going on, and they might have a whole other idea
Mm,
and kind of just be fronting the whole time. You know what I mean?
yeah.
That's scary,
Yeah.
because we don't want to be so closed off that we go into the next relationship, unwilling to really communicate or have a bond with them, but putting yourself out there and having that bond and trusting that it's real can be really scary.
Right.
And that's why we can touch on my rage, because I think half of me is this soft girl who believes in love and hope and kindness, and I was
Hopeless
just
romantic.
yeah, a hopeless romantic for sure. And the other part of it is like, there are people out there who will really take
Take
advantage
advantage
of
of
your
that. No,
kindness,
no question.
and that dichotomy of just figuring out who the vetting process and who really can fit into that
Yeah.
dating world with you, or even, I mean, friendships too, but
Right.
we're here talking about relationships. So, but I would say I'm also very uncomfortable with my own anger, because growing up, whenever I would be angry, I would go to crying, because that was more socially acceptable just for girls. I think in general, it's
Mhm.
like you can, it's okay to be sad, or like the more tamed emotions. But if you get to the angry part, then it's, erratic or
Right.
whatnot. So I'm still kind of getting in touch with my rage, but I think I deserve to have some anger, some edge, for sure.
What's one controversial opinion you have, or stance that you take that you think,
I,
if people heard you say this and be like, oh, that's controversial.
um, I truly believe that it's possible to be with someone for decades and neither one of you cheat. And I think that's actually controversial
It's controversial.
in our world right now. I think a lot of people are like, there's no way,
Mhm.
but I do believe that that is something that can and does happen.
Yeah,
And it's hard to even believe in sometimes, but
for sure.
That's my take.
For sure. No, I think what's happening in the dating world as we're experiencing, at least in Western culture, and I want to make sure we make that distinction,
For
because
sure.
Eastern cultures and other cultures around the world might be a little different. But in Western culture, there's hookup culture, right? Dating apps kind of explain everything. Like, you go on a dating app and it's like, here are the filters. It's like, um, looking to casually date, long term, looking for marriage. There's like 18 different categories of like what you're looking for,
Yeah.
right? And in a sense, it's basically I think like technology, especially like dating apps and any technology that's a reflection of society, basically shows what we think is normal, and what's more or less, if it's called normal, we call it acceptable, so to speak, right?
Right.
So because there's a casual dating world out there, sometimes I used to call it hookup culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
That causes a lot of issues, right? Because if someone out there is looking to participate in hookup culture or casually date, and you stumble across them and you're looking for a long-term marriage or long-term relationship or marriage, then it's like, well, if you're not willing to communicate, or somebody's like, oh, if I communicate too directly, that might ruin the dating experience. So I'm only looking for a hookup anyway. So I can just go ahead and omit that information and not be forthcoming about it.
Right.
And so, yeah.
And I think, if you're in the hookup culture mentality, in the casual dating, like I don't perceive that there's anything wrong with that if that's the place that you want to be in. But I
Mhm.
would say that's sort of like a chasing mentality. Like what do they say? Like I'm in the game. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like
Yeah.
if you don't want it, you're like, take me out the game.
Yeah.
So if you're in the game, it's still a game in your head. So part of that is going to be going for something that's not as easy to get. And so that results in people going for the people who are actually trying to be with somebody who wants something serious.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
So that creates a really big mess, because it's like, I'm here to play the game and catch somebody who doesn't want to be played with,
Right.
but I'm playing,
Right. Yep.
So it's sticky.
It is. You mentioned cheating in that too, and I think that's a great example of how the culture has shifted. 15, 20 years ago, there was no such thing as a side chick. There was no term for it,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, there's a legitimate term for it now.
That's
Like,
true.
and like, not only is there a term, but again, I think that when you label something and it becomes a part of daily normal discussion, you're normalizing it to some degree, right?
Right.
And so that sort of encourages cheating in some. There's obviously the idea of open relationships and marriages that will complicate things, I think, too, because it's like, okay,
Mhm.
well, you got to establish, you need more communication now to be like, okay, well, what boundaries exist? Before it was just like, if we're in a relationship, we're dating, don't be seeing nobody else, and that was kind of it.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's like, okay, well, exactly what do you mean if I'm in an open relationship or open marriage, or I'm interested in the idea of side chicks and that kind of thing, right? It's like, okay, well, how do you navigate this now?
Right.
Right? Like, how do I, what's my boundary? You know what I'm saying? But cheating is interesting because I think you said that it's like, it would be seen as controversial, which I agree with you, because I do think that a lot of people don't think it's possible.
Right. I think the belief in fidelity is controversial
Why do you think that?
nowadays.
Why do you think that is?
Just because, back in the day there wasn't a term for side chick or side dude or whatever, but that kind of stuff was still going on. So now that we brought it to the light, um, we kind of have this new idea of what dating could be, and I think for a lot of people, the best case scenario is that you're honest with the person that you're with, but you're not with only them, and that's like if you've lost your hope in being faithful to just one person, the next best thing is like, okay, they have side people, but they don't embarrass me, like they don't make it known. So that's okay. Or we talked it through. So like, that's okay. So I think people are just they've lost hope of what they really want. And so they're okay with,
Right. Right.
the one,
Yeah, that's preferences and all of those things do come. We can touch on that in a second. But what do you think? Okay, so in a lot of podcasts, there's a lot of discussion about. So, for instance, when you say the idea of fidelity will probably be perceived as being controversial, that stems from something, right? There's a social element where if you've been in 5 relationships, you've been cheated on 5 times, that's obviously going to have an impact on your psychology towards dating. You're going to be like, okay, well, maybe this is not possible, right? And I think that obviously is why a lot of people have opened themselves up to, or at least in our society, open relationships are far more common than they used to be. Because just the hope of finding something solid and where there's fidelity and trust at that level is, people are like giving up on it to some degree, which is, in my opinion, unfortunate.
Yeah.
But it stems from somewhere, right? And so it's like, what do you think is I make the argument, I'll say this, that people are making the argument, we'll say, that biologically, right, monogamy is not, right, the biological drive, so to speak, right? I think,
like it's not natural.
right, that it's not natural. So my take on that is I think that there is some truth to that. I think, for instance, for men, like men do have a biological drive to spread as much seed, so to speak, as, right, that's just biologically in us to do that, right? And so there does come a time in a man's life where he has to fight against those natural biological drives, for sure. I was telling my friend this the other day. I think every man has that capacity in them because we just have a biological drive. So you have to, as a man, be very firm, right? You have to exude qualities that I think ultimately women see and appreciate in men, right? Because if it is natural, and let's just say for 10,000 years, that's how people evolutionarily evolved, to become that, then you would expect that it would be something that women would accept universally. But it seems to be one of those things that women don't naturally just accept universally, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not a part of the entire social construct, so to speak. It's just really just something that exists biologically and we expect otherwise. And that could be for a number of different reasons. But I asked that question because I'm curious to know what your thoughts are on that. Like, just, and do you think that's where it stems from, why people think that fidelity is so unreachable and why the culture's changing as a result?
Um,
And do you think there's hope of the future if you're
there's always hope, but I'm telling myself that. So, um, when it comes to the fidelity piece of it, um, wait, what was your question? You said like,
Yeah, so do you agree with that, like the impulse of cheating, right? Because cheating in a sense is when you're with someone and you go behind, when you betray them,
mhm.
right, in a emotional or physical way, right? Do you think that that drive is a biological thing? And do you think, I will phrase it this way, do you think the culture is justified in holding that position because it's something that's a biological drive? Because there's a lot of people out there that think that because it's natural, it's fine. I'm not
Right.
one of those people, but just curious
Um,
to know what your thoughts
I think there is a natural biological desire to be desired, and from the guy's perspective, like, yeah, I think there's a biological desire to s- you know
are. Yeah,
spread your seed and all that.
right.
And I think the something that's really admirable about a man who has discipline is
Mhm.
the willingness and the drive to be able to be loyal.
Right.
And I think um for women, there's going to be this consistent desire to be, emotionally fulfilled and have somebody show up for you consistently. And when it comes to relationships, a lot of times that person isn't going to be their best on every day. And so, I think with women and men, there's a lot of discipline and commitment, especially on the days when you don't feel like this person likes you as much as the person who, tried to flirt with you at the grocery store or something, like,
Right.
for lack of, I don't want to make it a complicated metaphor or anecdote, but like,
Yep.
you know, I think a lot of it goes into your level of discipline and commitment to the person, which is
Mm,
where my definition of love, that's a big part of it.
yeah. Yeah. No,
So,
I agree
but
with
I
that.
do think there's an underlying desire for men to want to, like, reproduce, have some level of power, I guess you could say,
Mm,
and or really feel like a man. And I
mhm.
think there's going to be times if you're in a monogamous relationship where a man doesn't really feel like they're being seen as a man, and a woman doesn't really feel like she's being seen as the that woman
Mm,
sometimes. And I think that's when you either like lean more into each other and start having those candid conversations, whether that looks like, I need more date nights with you, or like, I want an open relationship. I don't really know. I think every person has their different needs, but the communication and willingness to talk about those needs with a person, I think that, maybe that's where our generation might lack a little bit, because we all have a lot of
For
trust issues
sure.
too.
Yeah.
But that's where, I think real connection is made,
Yeah.
regardless of how you handle it.
Yeah.
If you're choosing to go in deeper with that person rather than seek elsewhere.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's something that as a man, like first off, and I've said this before, dating for men is quite complicated.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's difficult at there's phases. There's the we meet phase, then there's the we're dating phase, and we're relationship phase, and then there's marriage, to put it simply, right? The meeting phase is very difficult for men, right? And by meeting, I define it as being, I'm interested in you. Let's continue a conversation. We trade information and we're talking after that. So we're
Mm-hmm.
moving towards the dating phase, right? Men get rejected quite often, right? Like 90% of the time we get rejected. And that camera just went off. Great. That one
Man.
did. But I think it's because of that, right? That there's a lot of talk about what happens in the dating world with men. It's like when you get to a certain status where you have the option, so you're not getting rejected as often,
Mm-hmm.
right? That men are going to explore their options, so to speak, right? So they'll give more so into that biological desire or whatever they feel like they want or need as a man, right? Because it takes time to become a man that is attractive to women.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Right. And then you like a man might start out wanting just one woman and then really like, for lack of better terms, perfecting his craft to be really desirable to women. And then over time, I guess there's a lot of dudes who have said, you put yourself out there 100 times, and if 10 people say yes, then that's 10 people,
Exactly.
So you slowly perfect your craft, you get good at it, and then I don't know that the desire to just be with one woman would still stay the same if you're seeing that, like, oh, I can have 20.
Right.
What
it gets
what's
more
your take on that?
complicated for sure for men, right? I think men have to like become disciplined in a way
Mhm.
that they're going to be able to fight against those impulses, because it's like the analogy is like if you have a hungry lion and you dangle a steak in front of him, that's kind of what it's like in a sense,
Right.
right? So you have to have a really, really disciplined lion to not go after what's readily available to him, especially if you're at the status where women are throwing themselves at you, right? And I
Right.
think that's why when you like Hollywood and entertainers and sports players, and they all like have issues in their, well, they all have situations that like agreements with their like significant others. So it happens often. I won't say all of them, but it happens
Right.
often enough, right?
It's common, yeah.
Right. It's really common for that reason, I think, right? Because men, when you get to that place, it becomes much more difficult to be stable in that way, right?
Mhm.
Which again, I think is a quality that women really like. If you see a man that's loyal, it's like that's really attractive. Let me say this. This might be slightly controversial, and you can tell me if you think this is true or not.
Yeah.
Do you think women are attracted to men that other women want?
Yeah.
So there's like a lot of, right?
I mean,
So,
my initial answer is yeah. I think in the same way that how I was talking about somebody who's playing the game is going to want something that's not as um, accessible or easy to get. It's kind of like, okay, I see that a lot of other women want this person, and so must be for a good reason or something like that. But that's all the more reason to have platonic guy girl friendships so that you
Right.
can go be a wing woman for them, because then it's like, oh, what? Yeah. So I do think there's some truth to that. But it's more of like I think, I don't know, I think it varies for people, but for me personally, it's like if I was out with somebody who I'm in a relationship with and I, walk around, be social, I'm talking to somebody else, and then I see a random girl's talking to them and he's being nice. And then, if the trust is there, I'm like, oh, okay, let's see how this plays out. Like, that's fun. I like that. I'm like, yes, of course you would want my man.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to walk up and I'm going to be really nice to the girl. I'm like, it's so
Right.
nice to meet you. And then you'll know that.
Do you think it's a bit of an ego boost for women?
Yeah, I
Like,
guess
you
so.
see that, you're like,
But
that's my guy. He's
Yeah, what is
attractive.
it?
I know.
I know for a lot of guys, it's kind of like, okay, if I'm in a relationship with a woman, then she needs to not be talking to guys in the same way that she was.
Mm.
And for me, I think that might be like I'm a naturally friendly person, and I read this thing that was like, if you think I'm flirting with you, then maybe look at how many interactions of kindness you have on a daily basis, because like I'm just trying to be nice. So I think that's where communication comes in for me too, because I'm like, I'm going to be a bubbly person. I'm going to be socializing with people. And for me, it's no question who I'm here with and who I take pride in. And I'm very loyal in a relationship. But that's been a conversation I've had to have with people I've been with, is like, okay, hopefully both of our levels of self-esteem and confidence and trust in each other are high enough to where, if like I'm talking to somebody else about music or production or I'm out here recording a song at a studio, like you can trust me.
Right.
and know that, I'm only talking as if you were sitting right next to me. Like anything I say wouldn't be an issue if you were there.
Right. Do you think do you understand why men think that way?
Yes.
Do you think there's a double standard as well in this regard? Because I think a lot of women out there might think that there is a double standard. You like, I can't talk to, You know what I mean? Like, and you can, and those kinds of things. That's where a lot of the conversation, I think, are in these YouTube streets are getting really
Yeah, I think
controversial.
that's where the communication comes in with each individual relationships, because one of my things is like I'm gonna have to be able to, in the music industry, this part is business, and it's not me. Like I I think there's still very much a line to it, and I would always, if I was in a relationship, I would make it known that I would be very, very confident and loyal to the person who I'm with. Um, but I'm gonna have to be in rooms where there are like probably like three guys making music and me, and my significant other might not be there, and that's where the trust comes in. That's huge.
Mm-hmm.
But I think one thing that I really take to heart, is trusting. If your partner says like this person is not a good person to talk to, like
That's
guy
big.
perspective,
Yeah,
like
yeah, that's
like
very
let's
big.
say you and I were dating, and you're like, I know this is your guy friend, but like he doesn't have good intentions or whatever. Listening to that and respecting that, because on my end, girls just know what other girls are coming at you with. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I would respect that the same goes for the guy. But I think in my past relationships, I did have a little bit of hesitance, because I'm like, what do you mean I can't talk to this friend I've known for like 3 years? And like,
Mm-hmm.
I had a lot of issues with that. But then, you always have to think about the shoe on the other foot. And I would be doing the same thing and want you to respect that too.
Yeah.
But I think it's a balance. I think um, you don't want to overly control your partner.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm big on just autonomy in general. So I might be a little more stubborn when it comes to those conversations, but I'm always going to approach it with respect.
Yeah.
And it's you and me versus the problem, not you versus me.
Right. Yep. Yeah. I asked you like specifically like what do you understand where this might come from or stem from in men, to why we like, if I'm dating you and you're in the production room, why I might be upset about it. Do you know where? Because there is you're right. I think everything you said, like there has to be trust, and all of those things have to be established within a relationship in order for it to work. Because if you do have a job or you're doing music, you are going to be around other men,
Mm-hmm.
right? But I think my question for ladies is, do you know why we feel that way, right? Because I think when you know why, you're equipped with the information, like, okay, that becomes a little easier to be like, okay, well, I need to make sure that if he says I'm uncomfortable with him, that it becomes a little easier to accept, as opposed to thinking he's trying to control me, right?
If I had to guess why, I would say, in college, I was in a long distance relationship, and the amount of times I heard, well, just because there's a goalie doesn't mean I can't score, is too many.
Yeah.
I mean, one time is too many to hear that, but I think you can't always trust the mentality of people who are around you. But no, you tell me why.
Okay, so let's start with the lady side, right? I think if you are in a bar, right, and you go to the bathroom, you come back and there's 2 or 3 girls around your guy, right? You're like, my man's attractive. Like that's an ego boost, right? That gives you a sense of it gives you a good feeling to know that like I'm with someone that girls like, because I think deep down inside, men and women both know that acquiring or guys being attractive to women is not easy, right? So if he is attracted to women, it validates that you're with a good guy, right? That other girls want, because it's like
but also like, why are you guys talking for that long though? Why weren't you like, my girl's in the bathroom, just so you know? But like that can be a little too extra too.
Yeah,
but yes,
it can be extra. But you know what I'm saying? The essence of what.
Yes, the essence.
For men, if I go to the bathroom and someone's coming in and I come out and someone's talking to you, all of those things can kind of be true as well too. My girl's attractive. I know she's attractive, right? Because she's beautiful. If girls are beautiful, and men know that men like beautiful women, like always be the case. But it's also dangerous for men, right? Because like you're not worried about some woman beating me up or assaulting me, right? That's a real possibility on the other way, right? A guy, like the same fear that you feel or that women might feel when they go outside because they know men are predators. As your boyfriend, I know that too. And now I have to protect you from that. That's the create space. That's the security portion of it. Physically, physical security, right? And so we have a natural fear of that. And we also have a natural fear that we know men are slick, right? We know we're men, so we know the what it takes. We know the game. We know what it takes to actually talk a girl into liking us. You know what I'm saying? And there's a risk of that, right? And I think to some degree, at least in us, we feel like given enough time, a man will find a way to be attractive to her, right? Like we're kind of designed to do, like we persevere through that our entire life. So a 35-year-old man is going to know what he's doing. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
And I have a natural fear that it has nothing really, and I tell women this all the time, it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with you. Like as a woman, like my security with you, I can trust you and all those things. But I know men, right? And I know how it normally, you know what I'm saying? So like on top of the danger aspect, like it's dangerous for us. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because if he does something, he touches you in a way that you don't like, I have to step in. You know what I'm saying? And now my life is on the line, along with our relationship could be on the line. Because what if I get beat up? You're gonna be like, dang, he can't protect me. You know what I'm saying? Like, so.
And it's crazy because that same fear could arise. Like if you're in the bathroom, I'm sitting there, somebody approaches me, you know, that's where I guess my biggest fear has come in, where I feel the least safe in college, you know, back in college, or in bar settings. There's a pressure to be extra accommodating or kind to men because their reactions can be dangerous for you. And so it's kind of funny, you know, your fear is kind of coming from the same impulsivity of a man.
Right.
And women get, a lot of women who I've met, as well as myself, have gotten really good at rejecting men kindly, which is also really important to me too. Because I don't ever want somebody to feel disrespected or dismissed or less than just because they took the effort to try to talk to me, you know?
Right.
But you know, there's the men who, you know, mustered up some courage to try to talk to me and did so respectfully. And then there's the men who will come up to you with everything they've got, all the lines and everything. And you grow to recognize those men pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And handling them can feel very unsafe or uncomfortable. So I can see why if I'm in a relationship and I'm out at a bar with like me and my 5 friends, my man's not there, there's this fear running through your head of, oh, who could be coming up to her?
Right.
What could they be saying? They could win her over. They could like
hurt
mistreat her.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
And my point that I'd probably make if I was having that conversation with someone I'm with is that, you know, I've had to deal with men like that for 10 plus years now, you know?
Yep. Yep.
But
and I know
it's valid for sure.
Yeah, I know a lot of women too take the position that I can kind of take care of myself as well too. And that's why I say like for guys, and guys have to be good. They have to learn how to communicate this well, right? Because I don't think a lot of men can be emotional about it and they just don't even know.
Or they don't want to say like, this is a fear of mine. They don't use the word fear.
Exactly. They don't want to say they don't even know how. Like like you have to learn as a man how to say things in a way that's going to be understood. I mean, that's what leaders, I think, ultimately learn how to do. They learn how to express themselves and put it in such a way that people who they are leading can understand and interpret the information correctly. So men have to get to the point where they can do that effectively.
Right.
And so they have to learn how to find a way to say it's not about me controlling. It's just that there are certain things, right? And it's not, again, not about you. You can probably handle yourself for 10 years, right? But have you been assaulted before? Have you been, you know, attacked? Have you felt uncomfortable? Right? Those are all things that as a man, I'm going to be able to provide and prevent you from going through. And so we have to find a way of being like, I'm not trying to control you, right? It's me trying to be what you would like me to be.
Yes.
And what would be helpful to you and our relationships in flourishing forward. You know what I'm saying?
And that's a big thing. The energy you come in with, the energy you bring into those conversations with your significant other is huge. Because if you're approaching it, like I said, like me, you versus the problem, then it could be a conversation versus like, depending on how a man or woman decides to approach that conversation, it can come off as like accusing the person of like, oh, I don't trust you, or I don't think you can take care of yourself.
Right.
But what it really is I want to step in and protect you even more because you deserve somebody to show up for you in that way.
Exactly.
You know?
Yep.
So if it's seen from a place of love and genuinity.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there's also a lot of men who crave control. So
yeah, that's true. Back to the vetting, back to the top, right? Like how do you vet appropriately, right? And we're going to take a break. We're going to charge these cameras. We'll come back and we'll come with a little bit more of that. Then we'll go into part 2, which is Jenna's healing.
Ah,
So
all right.
uh, we're back. Um, we got to figure out kind of how these cameras work, but this is part two. We're going to go into Jenna's healing in a second. We did quite a bit of stuff in the break.
We
Shot
did.
Nerf guns. Yeah, Jenna, sang the Star Spangled Banner. Did a
Mhm.
little bit of music stuff.
We did.
So.
Played some piano. You played piano. I sang a little bit.
Yeah, Jenna's learning. She's going to come back on the 4th.
Yeah.
We talked about maybe we do the Star
Sing the
Spangled
Star Spangled Banner.
Oh, perfect. Jenna's healing. Exactly what does
Yes.
that mean?
Well, as you can tell from part one, I'm not really typically an angry person. So part of healing will be getting comfortable with that side of me that I never have been. Um, I think just like for a lot of people, healing entails getting to know yourself on a new level, processing childhood wounds that still attract you to people who might not be best for you or still bring up old stuff. Um, and my biggest thing is that like healing is all a journey. I don't believe that anyone is healed,
Mhm.
but healing and growing is something I constantly want to be doing. And I think it's essential for us to be in good relationship with other people.
Yeah.
So
Kind of reaching back to the earlier part that we were talking about with vetting. Do you think your vetting process is better as a result of that? Like, because I think that's kind of in essence, right? Like, if we're not good at vetting, how do we become better at vetting? And part of
Right.
that is obviously would be to some degree healing, dealing with past traumas and all those kinds of things. Something I wrote on social media not too long ago was I think that this is, I tend to think I'm like a Winston Churchill or something. So I'd come up with these quotes that I think might be, your quotable earlier was amazing. But like, I think that a lesson that's not really ever taught is that experience can be your worst enemy. I think that a lot of times people lean on experience to give them wisdom or teach them things about life and living that they think that they have to acquire through going through things, right?
Yep.
But it can be your worst enemy because that will come with, like I said before, like if you're not evaluating your risk properly, you put yourself in a position to where you're now having to deal with things that you otherwise wouldn't have had to if you would have maybe taken the time to invest in yourself and figure out how to navigate and avoid those issues, right? And so
Right.
back to the point about healing, like that's what's important. And equipping yourself with the right tools, the right understanding, the right wisdom, the time to grow, the learning, and all that stuff can equip you to go out confidently and engage in scenarios and situations and be better at navigating through those situations without avoiding the opportunities that might come, right?
Right.
Because
And then the experience can help you when you're equipped
right,
for the experience.
exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
I would say in the past, I've been somebody who kind of has to learn things the hard way. And I think where that comes from is not being willing to trust my community or trust other people around me who can tell me before I have to learn the hard way. So for me, I guess it did take learning the hard way in some past experiences to where I know now there are certain red flags where it's just without a doubt it's a no for me after that,
Yeah.
So experience did help me, but now I know not to,
Do
now,
certain things or
yeah,
involve you.
yeah.
Do you feel like, because like kind of going along that thought of experience can be bad, do you feel like as a result there's something that, do you think your past experience have taken away something from you at this point? I think that's a scary thought for a lot of people to have,
Yeah.
right? Like I think when you go through certain things, we tend to want to think that we still have the same capabilities or the same availabilities to us that we would have had, that we wouldn't have had otherwise if we had not gone through those experiences, right? Something in the YouTube streets when you talk about dating is, for instance, if you can disqualify yourself from certain experiences if you have had past experiences, right? You can kind of fill in the blanks, and anybody can for their own individual lives. So, for instance, if if I'm an athlete, this is an analogy. If I'm an athlete and I blew my knee out 2 or 3 times, right? That will rob me of my future opportunity to play professional sports, right? Because my knee isn't as good, or it's not as healthy as it once was, right? I
Right.
think these things apply in all areas of our lives. And so the question is, do you think that your past experience has taken anything away from you, that you might be willing to share, or
Yeah, sure.
give general thoughts on it?
Yeah. So my general or underlying outlook on it is that everything happens exactly as it should, um, as it's supposed to, which is really hard to grapple with when you're like, I didn't deserve any of that. Why would that happen? Um, but that's just something I think I've chosen to know and believe and have a knowing of, so that I can process things from a perspective of it's happening for me, not happening to me. That helps me a lot when it comes to healing from things that I didn't expect to have to heal from, kind of thing. I do think that certain experiences have changed me in ways to where I'm somebody different than I saw myself being,
Mhm.
but I do think I'm more of who I wanted to be in the end because of what's happened to me, kind of thing.
Mhm.
Um, I I think, you know, sometimes certain versions of you can't come with you to the next stage of life, and you you become, some people might say like more jaded, but you also become more knowledgeable.
Mhm.
And for me, it looked like instead of letting my emotions take me and, take over my decision making, now I'm a little more logical. But I've always been a big proponent of
Mhm.
feeling your feelings fully and processing them. And I think there's a lot of power in that, and
Mhm.
in the intuition that I have, and that I think a lot of women have, and a lot of men have. Um, but now it's just a new level of, you know, putting myself first, and earning my own trust has to look like observing my emotions and not letting them control me in the future.
Mhm.
So part of it is kind of like, okay, I don't have this like happy go lucky outlook on everything all the time. But I still have that instilled within me, and that's who I am. So
Right.
the part of me that I don't ever want to lose, I know is still always going to be there.
Mhm.
I just kind of navigate things differently now, and I am thankful for that.
Right.
So
So do you think that what you've learned is a result of what you've been through?
I think I like to say in spite of what I've been through, because
Mm.
I never want to, one day look at all these awesome songs I've written and all this stuff that I've overcome and give the credit to the person who hurt me,
Mm.
like
Mhm.
I am going to take whatever I've been through and create something beautiful out of it in spite of the pain.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
like you
No, that
can
makes
kind of give
sense.
credit to the pain, but it's like, no, the pain tried to destroy me and I actually took it and made something cool with it. So,
Yeah. And that's a credit to you and anyone else that can sort of go through things, myself, everyone who
mhm.
can go through things and persevere through it and learn something from it and make the most out of right. What I'm curious to know though, and I think this is one of those revealing truths that I think that requires some dedication to really think about and consider, right? Where I'm going with this is there are things that we go through that we think. Let me give an analogy, and I think it'll make more sense.
Mhm.
I'm starting to come up, or at least I'm starting to believe this more as I get older, right? That to get the right answer, whatever the right answer is, in whatever field of study, whatever experience of life, to get the
Mhm.
right answer, I think people in our society have developed the mindset that to get the right answer, you have to go and figure out where the wrong answers are, right? Like I think people think that they're wrong answers, or they're the things that they've been through that have caused them issues or pain. People say, well, now I know what I don't like,
Mhm.
right? I don't necessarily think that that gets you closer to the right answer per se. It can help you cut certain things out,
Right. Keeps you
right?
away
It
from the
keeps
wrong
you
answer
from certain things, right?
for a minute. But
But I don't think it necessarily helps you get closer to the right answer. The analogy is I think in math, right? Like 2 + 2 is 4,
mhm.
right? And obviously that's a really simple algebra problem, arithmetic, right? But if you take 2 + 2 is 4, if bar, setting aside that like this is a multiple choice question, right?
Mhm.
Because I don't think life is multiple choice. Life is an infinite amount of possibilities, a spread of possibilities and opportunities and disadvantages and risks and a lot of variables. But if 2 plus 2 is 4, if do I do myself any justice thinking that I can go through a lot of wrong answers in order to get to the right one? So like just say 2 plus 2 is 4, and the teacher asks, say what's the right answer? And I go, is it 3? They go, no. I go, is it 2? Well, no. Is it 5? Is it 7? Is it 100? Is it 34? All those are wrong
Mhm.
answers. There's only one right one, right? So what I'm getting at is I can go through a lot of wrong answers and never quite get closer to the answer. It's
Right.
better to figure out and learn how to do the arithmetic problem
Yes.
and then land on the right answer. They'll take that time up front, right? So to relate it back to the conversation, I think that the question I'm asking is like, do you think, in other words, do you think you could have gotten to Jenna today without having gone through certain experiences?
I don't think I could have. I think the to go with that analogy, it kind of would have looked like trusting the teacher that it's for
Mm-hmm.
versus I'm a visual learner and I would need those little circle coins that we used to use for
Yeah.
addition and I would have to visually see and have some kind of, I guess, proof that it's for.
Mm-hmm.
So
But isn't that technically you spending the time to learn how to do it as opposed to just kind of doing guesswork and
I would
hoping
see it
that you learn
as
it?
the experience part,
Mm,
experiencing it for myself that it really is for versus someone telling me that it's for kind of thing.
yeah.
Um, but
That is,
yeah,
yeah, that actually brings up a good point. There's different kinds of experience, right? There is the experience of um, being just kind of doing guesswork,
right.
right? Versus, like I said, there's like, and this is kind of what I'm saying, like with the investing proposition, right? Like
Hmm.
investing to actually sit down and evaluate the risk. You're going through, you're taking the right steps to make the right decisions to get the right and proper rewards by evaluating the
Right.
risk. Then there on the other side is experience of me just either like throwing my money out there or throwing this, trying to do this and trying to figure it out as I'm going through and fall into the pitfalls, potentially losing money, potentially
Hmm.
losing friends, potentially losing experiences, potentially like missing opportunities. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
As opposed to like sitting back, maybe reading a little bit, thinking about it, asking some questions, gathering all the knowledge, and then going to see if I can get the right answer, you know, the first or second
Right.
time. You know what I mean? So what do you think about that?
Well, the way I see it, it kind of, I mean, I keep going back to that analogy. I think it's kind of like the little tick things. Everybody has tools that can help them get to the right answer. And I think you
Mm,
kind of got to go in with a game plan. And that's why, I mean, I work with kids and trying to figure out the way their brain works is how I teach them. Because if you're not guiding somebody in the way they learn best, then, it's probably not the most efficient way to teach them kind of thing. So those little counters would be my way of learning. And so I guess for me, like my experience, if I map it out right and have the right tools, experience can be really beneficial. But if I'm just calling out numbers, there's infinite wrong answers I
right,
could have.
exactly. Right.
So um, I guess the way that translates to dating today kind of thing um, looks a lot like having the right tools and kind of having a teacher or somebody that you trust to tell you that it's for, having good experience with the tools to show you that it's for, and
Mm,
then you concluding that it's for,
yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
But with all these dating occurrences and the way we navigate everything, it does feel more like a lot of people are just calling out numbers,
Right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So,
And I guess that's kind of where that's the vetting process that we were
mhm,
talking about earlier, right? That's the, I guess we'll call it good experience. That's the taking the investment time. That's really figuring out what it is you want, what is available for you to have, and even aligning your wants with the proper expectations and
yeah.
reality. Because obviously sometimes we can have a hyper inflated sense of what we think.
Yeah.
Sometimes we think we deserve things, or sometimes we think we're entitled to things.
That brings me to a really good point that I don't want to forget is one of my biggest things as I'm healing, processing, growing is I don't ever want to ask something of somebody else that I also can't bring to the table. And I know
Mm,
there's a lot of like, you know, traditional gender norms or traditional roles. And I think, a lot, different partners can play different parts in that or both parts or whatever. Um, but as far as like when it comes to character and things that I'm asking of a partner like that really matter to me, I want to be able to bring at least the equivalent or or balance it out. I don't ever want to be asking something of them that I haven't at least looked within myself to try to make happen.
Yeah.
And I think another thing is a lot of people say like, look to be like, are you looking to be the partner that the person you wants, which can be kind of harmful because I'm very like, I don't like being put in a box or like a traditional woman, like this is a woman's place kind of box. But that's been part of my healing journey is like, okay, how can I be, a little bit more of service, even being willing to take my dad's plate after we eat food and stuff like that. It's like, it's okay to admit that you're a woman who wants to have a family and wants to be married. And, and that's hard in this world sometimes.
It's just very difficult.
Just like admit that like, okay, part of me wants this traditionalness.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off,
no,
but
you're good.
there are certain terms out there that I want to make sure that like the audience and everybody's, knows that we're on the podcast are familiar with. So it's like the idea of what a pick me is, you've ever heard that term? Which is the opposite, I guess, of a city girl. Just the slang terms that are going around nowadays. And do you feel like wanting marriage and long-term relationship, because it sounds like to some degree you're saying that like that is too, it feels like the culture is resisting that in some way, shape, or form today, or there's pressure that if you want those things that's old or traditional or it's outdated. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think where my hesitation comes in is like I have a niece and I have a lot of little kids that look up to me, and I don't ever want her to think that she has this one expectation or one place. And I also was raised very like hyper independent. Like if we traveled, we were carrying our own carry on, and you could only fit like you were carrying your own things, and if you couldn't pick it up with your own strength, then you don't need to be packing it, kind of thing.
It's a good lesson.
Yeah, there's
so many things can be derived from that.
That's so deep.
Yeah, it is.
But I think, I've seen women in older generations get stuck in this box or stuck in marriages or stuck in somewhere that they're not happy or they don't feel valued, and they do feel kind of stuck. So I never want that for me or for, girls who are growing up to think that like, you only have one place in this world kind of thing. So I have a hesitation for that. But I believe that in any connections or relationships I want in the future, I'm not going to be put in those boxes, and I can still fulfill some more traditional, places, but I don't think that everyone needs to,
Yeah. Well, I guess that actually, when we talk about the general, right? Because it's hard to know individually what people need. Do you think, generally speaking, there are certain qualities? I know it's tough. Whenever these kinds of questions are asked, it's very difficult to be controversial. It's very difficult to sort of say like, yeah, I think, for instance, it wouldn't be controversial for me to say everyone needs to drink water. You know what I'm saying? I find that in the dating and relationship world, we tend to like, we treat it like it's special, like in this sense. But I think it can be seen like many other things. Like there's certain biological things that we need, you know what I'm saying, that nobody would argue with. There's certain ways of going about working a job, regardless of where you are. There's certain things that you need to, if you want to become a computer programmer, you need to learn code, right? It's just the way that it is, because computers operate a certain way and you have to understand the language. I think to some degree that also exists in the dating world. I think even though people there is a breadth of individuals, right? But I think there are certain needs that we have. And so when we speak about like boxes, like you were saying, right? The question is are there appropriate boxes that people should get into? You know what I'm saying? And not, you know what I'm saying? Like, so like,
I get what you're saying. For me personally, I think there are so many different boxes. Like, I don't know. I think the most important thing is communicating, knowing yourself, knowing your own needs, and then communicating those to the other person and picking somebody who can show up in the ways that you need and might lack in. And I think that can look different for a lot of different relationships. There was something else that I wanted to say, but I can't really remember it, but it'll come back to me.
Yeah. So I think like, for instance, I'll say on behalf of men, I think men, one of the boxes is
Oh, I remember.
men should be disciplined. Men should become more disciplined.
Mhm.
That doesn't necessarily mean that you can't explore, you can't determine for yourself what you need as an individual, like what your individual tastes are and preferences in dating and all those kinds of things. But there is, in my mind, a certain place discipline wise that men have to learn how to become in order to, and I guess it does to some degree depend upon what your goals are, what your expectations are for your own personal life. But I think as a society, it's like if we're going to live in society together and be,
Mhm.
and have it work to some degree, there's certain things that we have to compromise about our individualism and even our freedoms. Like I have to give up some of my freedom in order to
For
live
sure.
with other people, right? So I think all those things you take into account, and it's just like I think discipline would be one of those things that I'd like preach to all men. Like become disciplined, understand what it takes to get from point A to point B, and do it in a way that's going to be respectful and with honor, and make sure that you're practicing good leadership qualities so that you're valuable to yourself, your community, ultimately your family,
Mhm.
your wife and your kids, etc. If wife and kids are a part of it, but I think it goes beyond that too, like because men very oftentimes are in service positions when it comes to just taking out the trash or garbage. You know what I mean, those kind
Mhm.
of things become important. You know what
Yeah. I think that discipline, that level of discipline, is something that um, I believe men and women should have, and it might look different um, sometimes,
I
but
mean?
that discipline allows for the dependability in the relationship. So
Mm,
I think that's key.
yeah.
And when it comes to my hesitation with traditional standards for women, I think another reason I stray away from them is because a lot of times the expectations also come along with like expectations of how like not speaking out for yourself,
Hmm.
or not necessarily knowing who you are, or allowing yourself to change the way that you present yourself and into maybe like a less authentic version so that you can fit in the mold of what your uh partner tells you to be.
Hmm.
And so that's something that I won't compromise on. So
Yeah.
like, if it comes to like I know I want to get better at cooking for myself, and that's something that I want to be good at for my partner in the
Yeah.
future. And I know that's a traditional thing, but that's something where I personally I'm cool with that. I can agree with that. And I mean, hopefully he's going to be cooking a lot too, because like I would love that to be a team
Yeah.
effort thing, but that's something I want to get good at for me. And I would like to show my love in that way in the future.
Hmm.
Um, but that's one traditional thing that I'm okay with. And then there are also traditional things where I'm like, okay, you're not going to find this in me. So you might need to find a different girl
Yeah.
if you want her to be like very soft spoken and very okay with whatever you tell her to do, and like without asking questions. Like I'm always going to ask questions. I'm always going to know why, and I'm always going to want to communicate.
Right.
So
Yeah. I think it's a good way of probably putting it, I think, is there are certain things that I think people should find in essence, right? Like if I say discipline, like that's
Mhm.
an essential part of, I think who a man should become. The actions that are a result of that can be different. So for instance, like you say, you want to cook,
Right.
right?
That would
Like
be more consistent
that's a,
discipline with
right. That's,
cooking for myself and
yeah,
whoever else. Yeah.
but that's like an action, right?
Mm-hmm.
The essential part of that is the nurturing, right? Like the quality of the nurturing person that I think women are very good and very natural at,
Mm-hmm.
right? That manifests itself with cooking. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? So let's just say like you just didn't cook at all, but you exhibited that in other ways, in many other ways, right?
Right.
Someone would be able to see that and notice it, like that's the quality I like. You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? It doesn't have to necessarily be cooking itself. I think when we think cooking, we kind of just like, oh, that's a traditional thing, the action itself. But really
Right.
it's just the
The essence
nurturing,
of
the
it. Yeah.
essence, the what, you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's
Yeah. Um, and a big part of me, goes back to nature versus nurture. I'm like, okay, how many of us women are really nurturing and good with babies because we were given a baby doll at the age of 2, and that
hmm
was how we played,
hmm
And like, could I be really good at flying a plane right now, or obsessed with trains, or like a really great mechanic? Maybe, because I actually like looking at how things work and all that, but I wasn't given those at a young age and wasn't formed with those, but I love kids and I love babies and I am very nurturing. So I'm like, a lot of it is instilled in me one way or another. And I think it's cool as we get to this age, we get to navigate how much of it we still are,
Yeah.
they say you kind of you are who you always were kind of thing. So
Yeah.
there's when I'm healing the inner child in me, I go back to the things I loved when I was 5 years old. And a lot of those things I still love now. But even then I'm like, okay, so when I was 5, who like
Yeah.
who told me that I like that? And do I still really like it?
Yeah.
There's a lot to navigate. And I think
Yeah.
that's a big part of healing is figuring out yourself and really knowing yourself so that if somebody tries to question you about who you are or change that, you have ground to stand on and things to communicate.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I think it's so important to like when you can know yourself that way. And I think if you can embody some of these at the essential essence level, these values, I think overall you become more attractive to people, not just at a relationship capacity. I think more people will notice like your friends will, you know what I mean, see that
Mhm.
in you. You'll become more valuable to your community in a way that's going to be very helpful and very useful for everyone around you. And ultimately, obviously, for a relationship and ultimately your kids and a family. And so I think it's important to channel that. And so I think we're just saying it's spot on. I think it's just really important to remember those things.
Right.
And a lot of people, I think they're afraid that at the action level, oh, I'm going to become this thing that I don't want to be. I don't want to learn how to cook. I don't want to learn how to do these things as a man. I don't want to be disciplined. I just want to kind of do my own thing. And it's just like, okay, like, and I'm a strong proponent of let people kind of do what they like. All right, whatever you want to do.
Find out who
again,
you are.
but again, know the cost and
Right.
what's associated with that and what you're going to give up. Like there's costs associated with everything,
Mhm.
and if you don't know what those costs are, and I think you're doing yourself a disservice when you're engaging in whatever it is,
Right.
Activity wise or otherwise.
Like for instance, right now, metaphorically, or what, to continue the metaphors, what it will look like for me is cooking my own food and figuring out how much I really do like cooking versus don't.
Mhm.
And then I can bring that and communicate, my needs on the other end. Like I think for every person who knows themselves and knows uh where their strengths are, there's going to be somebody who complements those equally. So if I'm half good at cooking, then my partner I'm supposed to be with is going to be filling in that other half,
Yeah.
Or if I find out, oh, I really do enjoy cooking, I could get really good at it. Or this is not for me, then maybe my partner will be the good cook and I'll be really good at something else that complements it. But
Right.
it all goes back to really having done the work and also the fun of figuring out what you like and who you are
Yeah.
so that you can bring it back to that relationship.
That's what I was going to say. When you approach things, and I think in my own life I see this as being the case. When you approach things in a positive manner, you'll be surprised how much you actually enjoy it.
Right.
Or rather, like you'll find things in it that you enjoy that will enable. Right. But if you approach it as like, oh, I don't want to do this because I feel like I'm pressured to do it, or when you approach it negatively, it's just like, of course it's going to be a chore.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? Of course you're not like. So for instance, if you want to learn how to cook more, but maybe you're not good at it. You know what I'm saying? You meet somebody and it's like, oh, I can help you with that. Now it's an activity that we can learn together, you know what I'm saying? And it just becomes a much, much better environment and a much, much more, like you said, fun
Right.
environment to be a part of. And you're less likely to look around like, okay, well, let me see if there's somebody else available out there for me. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like we actually engage and do all these things together. It's just, we're learning and we're growing together because when you obviously get together, it's a partnership. There is, synergies. There's all kinds of stuff. There's a commitment to each other. We're dedicated. We're I guess in a traditional sort of idea of well, maybe more of a religious, but one flesh. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? Like you proceed in that sort of idea, and I think it's just all around better.
Right. And that just kind of made me think of how when you're um getting to know yourself and kind of making it a fun journey, like in your singleness, um that kind of opens the door to view things in a way that are more fun, that is more fun. So
Mhm.
like for instance, if somebody messages me and is trying to, flirt with me or something or get to know me and they say like, "Are you a good cook?" That's kind of like a red flag for me, or I kind of tense up because I'm like, why does that matter to you
Right.
first? Like, what about
Right.
who I am and all this? But when I'm single and just worrying about improving myself, it can be like fun to make my favorite Chipotle bowl, but make it at home.
Mhm.
So that kind of goes back to being comfortable with being by yourself
Yeah.
and making this is going to sound really sad, but making the loneliness fun. Like just being your own best friend, which also sounds really sad too. But like, you're going to be stuck with your own consciousness for the rest of your life. So you might as well make friends with it
Right.
and figure out what you like and frame it in a fun way
Yeah.
that
I
helps you.
kind of see this. I see why people would see it as being that, but I think it's just really because in my mind, another person isn't going to be able to make you happy,
Right.
right? They're not going to be able to give you that. So it's really you learning for yourself what happiness is
Mm-hmm.
and how to deal with the moments when you're not happy, right? Because I think a lot of people in today's world are chasing happiness.
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily think that's the right approach.
Right. I agree.
I think fulfillment, purpose, and all of those bigger words that require, for some people, unfortunately, more thought and time,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because happiness is a feeling. There's gonna be some days you wake up and you don't feel
Right.
it, and so we can go down a whole rabbit hole in that way. But I think when you spend that time to really understand yourself and get to a place where you are happy, comfortable, satisfied, you're able to look at life in a positive way. You're able to really let go of those things in your past that have been chaining you down. That's when you'll see the most success in all things. And I think relationships is one big one that you'll see
Yes.
success in.
And going into relationships with the view of I'm here to give, not necessarily to take. I think if you're going into a relationship because you're lonely or because you want something out of it, that's kind of a risky
Oh yeah,
risky
for
view
sure.
on the relationship.
Yep.
It puts a lot of pressure on the relationship that somebody else cannot fulfill for you, and it's a little bit self-serving. So it's not to say like until you love yourself well enough, you deserve to be single, or like you don't deserve to be in a relationship. Like I think any of us, if we wanted to tomorrow, could get in a relationship, but that's not the relationship you need to be in. So
Yep.
that I do have a hard time. Like I think a lot of women who get married young, uh, or sometimes just the advice you get when you're single and in your 20s is like, oh well, you just need to keep like loving yourself or worrying about yourself, and then like when you're supposed to meet the person you will, or something, which is hard to hear from somebody who is already married, kind of thing. But a lot of it just comes back to like you're not doing anything wrong by wanting. It's normal to want a relationship, and it's also okay to feel lonely, and it's not something you're doing wrong. Like you're not single because you did something wrong. You're
Right.
single because this is the present moment, and that you're exactly where you need to be at this time.
Yep. Yep.
And so just I know that I've wanted a relationship so badly in the past that I've really like prayed almost to the point of like, I don't care if this is the love I'm supposed to have. I just want to love somebody, and I just want to have somebody to love. And
Yep.
that is coming from a place of lack versus like two people being all in, each giving 100%, not 50-50, but 100, and being present and being ready.
Yep.
And what you don't have to be healed to deserve a relationship, but
Right.
it's
Yep.
going to come at the right time. It's not,
Yep.
you're not doing anything wrong.
Yep. And I think you alluded to something earlier too, like you're never going to be fully there. You're always going to be making improvements. And so I think what's really important is getting to your place to a place of self-awareness to where you know what your limitations are and you can correctly set the appropriate boundaries. So if you
Yes.
do get into something, you can help inform, you can get some assistance from the person to like maybe they'll help you get over some of those things because maybe they provide something that was taken away from you. Counseling, all kinds of things, right? And so you said something that just resonated with me, so I want to throw that in there because it's like you don't have to be fully healed. Because I'm like, what does fully healed mean? Which we could kind of get more into as well too. But it's but I think you're right. There's always growth. You're always going to be growing, and there's always going to be something that you're looking forward to becoming better at, especially in relationships. It's already hard enough taking it. Like I live in this house by myself, right? Like, I mean, it's hard enough taking care of one person. Like two people, like somebody else, you may have to consider someone else.
Right.
Like, it's really hard, right? So just don't take it lightly. Be self-aware and, you know.
And that's why you want to come from a place of giving, to where like your bad days, they pick up the slack, and their bad days, you pick up the slack. But at the end of the day, you came in two complete people. So you know your own, you know each other's weaknesses. And I think another big part of it is knowing what you yourself need to do in order to keep your own self well. Like for me, journaling every morning, there's just this little like fill in the blank journal I have, really helps a lot. And then I do it at night too. And I noticed in one relationship I had back in the day, like I stopped journaling, and I noted that, and I saw that, and I was wondering why my mental was off. And I would try to, bring it back to the person I was dating and be like, oh, well, I must be off because of this relationship. But also that comes back to me, and, needing to take a step back, or noting that, if something is off, or if I'm not feeling like I know myself as well, and I'm just not feeling like I'm myself, there's something there worth, reevaluating. And if your partner isn't willing to communicate with you and navigate that with you, and wanting to see the best version of you, then that's a huge red flag. Like, then you're doing more work keeping up with, like you said, keeping up with two people rather than yourself, and you're losing yourself in it. And you want to really be in something that's lifting you both up.
Exactly. Philosophy with Jenna. There you go. Jenna's healing.
Yeah.
Counselor. If you need help, go to Jenna. You know where to find it. Jenna from the A.
Yes. Not official counseling, not clinical counseling, just personal life truth experience counseling.
Well, she works with kids, and we're all kids at heart.
Yeah, that's
so
true.
There you go. One more question, and then we'll wrap it up. Relationship status. No, I'm kidding. Don't answer that. If you could say one thing to the people, what would it be as a wrap-up point?
I think my biggest thing is you are exactly where you're supposed to be right now. That's something that has gotten me through a lot. You're exactly where you're supposed to be right now, and it's not always going to feel as heavy as it does right now, if it feels heavy.
There you go.
That's it.
Quotable right there. I forgot what you said earlier, but we'll rewatch it, and we'll put that. I'll put that on the wall somewhere.
The quote, for every profound quote, there's an equal and opposite profound quote.
It was something like that. Yes, perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's been
We'll
really
definitely
fun.
do this again. We can do a part 2 of relationships, part 2 too. We can do another topic, but it's been amazing. Thank you guys for tuning in.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah, Jenna Mercer, look her up. And of course, if you want to like and subscribe, do that. But always comments, I think are more valuable to me than likes and subscriptions, even though that's also welcome. So if you want us to go viral, let's go viral. If you want to do this and get bigger, make the platform bigger, that's exciting too. But we're also more interested in the conversation, seeing what everybody thinks, really trying to lean into what's true, reveal certain truths so we can all become better. So as always, thank you, Eternal Team. We will see you at the next episode.